Good evening, everyone. I am Shashank Satish. I am the curator of the show Digital Disembodiments. Thank you for being here on a Sunday evening at 5 p.m. Um, we welcome you, the artist and I welcome you to this third panel discussion of the Digital Disembodiment Show. Before I begin, I just want to say a few housekeeping instructions. When a speaker is speaking, we kindly request you to put yourself on mute to avoid any disturbance. You're welcome to keep your videos on, and there will be time for question answers later when you can unmute yourself and ask questions at the end. And please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted later on the Digital Disembodiments project page. With that, let's begin for today. Let me just change the screen for you. Digital Disembodiments was an idea that I had where I was looking at artists from India or artists in India who are working with the idea of the body in the digital space. And it has culminated in this 6-month show. We have just passed our halfway mark, and it is a lineup of 19 different fantastic artists from India, 3 of whom are present on the show. I will introduce you to them very briefly in the coming few slides. Apart from them, I'm just going to read out all the names of the artists who are on the show, some fantastic artists. I invite everyone to go on to the virtual art show on New Art City and check all of their works out. In your chat box, you will see there are links, important links to the show that are pinned, and you can click on those links and explore the show, which is live currently and also has a project page to view all the previous works that have events and workshops that have happened in the past 3.5 months since October 27th. So we have works of Amol Patil, Anisha Bade, Aravani Art Project, Chitra Ganesh, Dhruva Mistry, Goji, Harshit Agrawal, who's with us on the meeting, Natasha Singh, Arijit Sen, Priyesh Trivedi, Pushpamala N, Sahil Betigeri, who's also with us, Sajid Wajid Sheikh, Sam Madhu, Sailesh BR, myself included, Vivek Vilasani, Waswo X Waswo, who's also with us on the show, and Yogesh Ramkrishna. So in today's panel discussion, we are covering the third theme, the third curatorial thematic of the show, which is named Fungible Avatars, which I will briefly explain in the coming slides. And on the bottom, you can see the names of the artists within this thematic of the show. Before I delve into this, this is further information on today's talk, and briefly we are going to address the idea of identity and ownership and creativity and explore it through the works of Harshit, Sahil and Waswo through their own presentations and a panel discussion that follows. The first 10 minutes will be an introduction to the exhibition, followed by the introduction to the panelists, and the 3 artists will have 8 to 10 minutes to present their own work, after which Anuj will come and moderate a discussion on the thematic of fungible avatars, after which we'll have the panel open to discussions and question and answers. So let me just play this video to give you an introduction of the show.
Digital Disembodiments is a virtual group exhibition that delves into the concept of the body and its intersection with the digital realm in contemporary Indian art. In the digital space, disembodiment refers to situations where a person's identity or presence is no longer tied to a physical body, where traditional understandings of the body are constantly reshaped. The exhibition investigates how the anthropomorphic body is rendered, reimagined, and reconfigured within digital landscapes, thereby reflecting on the artist's embodied agency in crafting the digital body.
So, through the show and the works of 19 fantastic artists, we're examining the practices at the intersection of art and technology, looking at how artists respond to these technologies. Of course, it is a group show which is curated into three different thematics, which I will briefly touch upon, and to look at how anthropomorphism mutates in the digital space. What are the different forms of the human body that artists create, and what do they represent? How are artists engaging with Indian thought and philosophies? So this is an immersive experience, and I encourage everyone to explore the show at your own pace after the talk. So, just a little bit about the platform on which the show is hosted. It is on the New Art City virtual art space, and it is ideal to view the artworks on your computer, ideally on your computer with a good internet connection. And if you have access to a mouse and a keyboard, you will have the best experience of the show, and I encourage all of you to visit the show. So the works of the 19 different artists are divided into three multimedia formats, such as images, which have digital photography, comics, illustrations, drawings, and AI generated art. Videos will have CGI, animation, short films, or performance. And there are also 3D sculptures. These are just grazing the kind of formats. I encourage you to explore these further on your own. There is another quick video that I would like to play.
Digital Dweepa reimagines the traditional concept of Jambu Dweepa, a sacred island from ancient Indian cosmology, as a digital landscape, intertwining mythology, spirituality, and technology in a contemporary Indian art context. Rooted in ancient Indian beliefs of realms beyond the material, Digital Dweepa becomes a virtual space where art and techno spirituality converge. Here, the anthropomorphic body is dissolved and reformed, challenging traditional boundaries between the physical and digital worlds. The digital sphere of Digital Dweepa acts as a bridge, offering a space for Indian artists to explore identity, embodiment, and the fluid nature of consciousness within a virtual environment. By navigating three thematic spaces, metaphysical souls, cybernetic spirits, and fungible avatars, viewers encounter the fusion of ancient thought with digital creation, prompting reflection on evolving human experience. Through art that transcends the physical, Digital Dweepa invites audiences to contemplate new myths and meanings in an increasingly virtual existence.
So far, we've had panel discussions on the other two thematics. So, this is the third in the series. And I'm just going to leave this on the screen while I read it out. In Indian mythology, an avatar signifies the physical incarnation of divinities, taking on various forms to restore balance in the world. In contrast, fungible refers to something that can be easily interchanged or replaced. The Fungible Avatars portal showcases digital representations of the human body that can be effortlessly transformed, highlighting the fluidity of identity. Unlike NFTs in contemporary art, which focuses on the unique ownership of individuality of digital materials, the concept of fungible avatars challenges the viewers to question the realities of identity and ownership of the digital self, essentially separated from the digital body. I again encourage you to all visit the show and explore the three different thematics. I'm going to briefly touch upon this slide, which will help you kind of visualize how the digital Dvipa space of the show is curated. So, the digital Dvipa is the central space which holds together the three thematics, which we just saw in the brief video. And within each of these thematics or cosmos that I would like to call, there are artworks thematically curated where artists' works are talking to each other. And in today's panel discussion, we are going to address the idea of fungible avatars that I just introduced through the works of Harshit, Sahil, and Waswo. And of course, there are other artists, but we will be discussing it in a more nuanced manner with the artists present here today. So, with that, we come to the main agenda and the panel discussion. I hope you're all as excited to hear from the artists than me telling you about their work. So, straight from the horse's mouth. Right now, I will go in alphabetical order and then let the three artists introduce their artwork. So I will give a brief introduction to the artists and invite them to talk and present their work. Let me just call on Harshit first and also remind him that we have roughly 8 to 10 minutes to cover the presentation. We have a few slides with their work. So I will now briefly introduce Harshit. Welcome, Harshit. Harshit is an Indian artist working with emerging technologies, primarily artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, and 3D printing. His practice is centered around the theme of exploring poetics of technology in our already post human existence. He's a graduate of MIT Media Lab in the US and IIT Guwahati in India. He was Google Arts and Culture's first artist resident in India. He he held India's first solo exhibition of AI art at Imami Art Gallery in Kolkata in September 2021. His work has been extensively covered in international media, including BBC, New York Times, ArtNet, and Stirworld. Harshit has been working in the space of AI and art for a decade now. He was the only Indian artist among seven international art pioneers at the first global exhibition of AI art in Contemporary Gallery at Nature Mod Gallery in 2018. He has exhibited work at several premier museums, galleries, and art festivals around the world, like Ars Electronica in Austria, Asia Culture Center in Gwangju, Korea, and India Art Fair, among others. With that brief introduction, I welcome Harshit to present his work. And Harshit, I think you're on mute. You can just let me know when you want me to move to the next slide.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm dialed in through two devices actually. So yeah, speaking through one.
Okay, got it.
But thank you so much for having me here and for making me part of the show and also for introducing my works a little bit. I'll not take up much time like you said already. I'll kind of keep it brief, talk a bit about some of the works that are at the exhibition and maybe 2, 3 more that are not part of this exhibition. Briefly, like just to speak of like what I do, what I'm interested in is basically what Shashank was saying is to kind of look at this kind of technosphere almost that we find ourselves in, and see how to kind of engage with it in more artistic and critical ways. I think I have a background in kind of uh, technology, but also media arts, and I think that kind of overlap is where I base my practice out of. So yeah, we could move to the next slide, which is this work, which is part of the show in a lot of ways, talking about also like a lot of my work actually deals with the idea of identity also. So this particular work starts off as different like ways in which we have probably as cultures like tried to transcend the idea of identity through masks over the years, and we find ourselves in kind of a scenario of uh, social media, etc., with a lot of digital masks or filters, etc. And um, like they kind of start enforcing a sense of identity for people where there is a certain standardization of ideas of beauty, etc., that start emerging with this collective usage of digital masks. And so this work basically starts off with those like more traditional masks, and then kind of very slowly tries to transform them into what might be considered as notions of masks or beauty today. So yeah, it's a slightly longish video. You could watch it later maybe, but we could move to the next slide. Yeah. Uh, And yeah, like I was speaking about the idea of mask, a lot of my work, as you'll see through the presentation, kind of deals with these objects which do like allow you to transform your sense of identity in a certain way, and historically also have been used in various ways. So this was more of an early work. This was done earlier than the one that I previously showed. I think the chronology of it is a bit mismatched, but this was done purely as a study of using AI models. So this was back in 2017, 2018, using AI models called generative adversarial networks, and kind of uh, training them on partially like masks from Indian culture, but also like human faces, and trying to create like the idea of what AI sees as a human face within kind of these masks. So these were some like results of that. We can move to the next slide, which is again like this. I think the context of this work is is a bit important in certain sense, where like I was saying, I was working with AI for been working with AI for over a decade now, and the idea of at least initially AI nowadays it's a lot about like writing text prompts and getting like some visuals out, which happens through kind of pre-trained AI models, which large tech companies like Google, etc., have made from like millions and millions of images online, right? And then that is the kind of reality of AI, like the reality that AI has seen. And initially, like if you were to train your own model, you could use certain like algorithms to train them, and you would need to have a data set of images, like at least a few thousand images to do something meaningful with that. And initial days, like again around 2015, 16, 2017, etc., when kind of AI was not as much spoken of as it is today, but was still a very like relevant part of our reality. Like when I was working with these models, the idea of not having like a lot of like Eastern aesthetics as part of the AI art conversation was something that often bothered me. And so I did a lot of work in kind of collecting and curating data sets of more Eastern art, and then creating works based on that, and then like letting the machine kind of hallucinate its representations of of those data sets. Yeah, we can move to the next slide. This is also like an early work with AI, which deals with the human body very directly and kind of uh, reversing the uh, human machine gaze in a certain sense. So here the machine is looking into the insides of the human body, particularly like uh, the gut and kind of the thigh region, looking at human dissection videos. So the AI kind of looks at these human dissection videos and tries to create its own like representation of what human is in a certain way, not the kind of glorified idea of human with intellect, etc., but just as we would probably treat machines with this idea of like wires and nuts and bolts and what kind of that flipped kind of gaze in a certain sense is. Yeah, we can move to the next slide, which is, yeah, so again, kind of, this is a more, it's an older work, but a more recently taken video installation of the work, which was, so this is again dealing with, as you can see, like not mask directly, but more like face paint and the idea of again identity transformation as has existed in a lot of Indian art forms. So this is kind of a live interactive work where people stand and their faces are transformed into these Thayyam and Kathakali like face forms in real time using two AI models, and there is kind of this surveillance camera on top of the screens that looks at people's faces, tries to capture their face structure, and then recreate that in the form of these Thayyam Kathakali forms. And different kind of thoughts behind the work, like the idea of obviously being surveilled in today's times and using kind of that same technology of face recognition in a slightly different capacity here, in a more artistic capacity of breaking down in a certain sense the barrier that's existed between Thayyam and Kathakali as social performances of the kind of caste differences that have existed, and who gets to perform what and what kind of patronage is enjoyed by both of these forms. And here, kind of using AI in a kind of the opposite way of perpetuating bias to maybe bring both of these like together, where everyone sees themselves as both these identities. And this is the last slide, which I'll quickly show. It's a longer video, but we won't play the entire thing. It's actually a larger like sculptural work which I've done. So it's about 7.5 feet cube, LED cube, which has these four like garden spaces around it, and it's very much like coming from the Garden of Earthly Delights and what the idea of garden or just leisure spaces means today. It's become very much that of uh, technology. Like a lot of us would treat leisure spaces or social media and online spaces like that, and kind of that again the enforcing of identity filter bubbles, etc., that happens through gardens of today, as it has always happened in a certain way, and kind of yeah, the whole kind of video speaks through that, through the lens of these four gardens, with one of the sides being the lens of the gardener, or this kind of human resource required in maintaining the pristinity of a garden, so to say. And in today's like counterpart of digital gardens, you have a lot of like human labor that goes into maintaining these AIs and making sure that we get like a clean uh, side of the internet. A lot of like people, like the ones who are cleaning this stuff up, go through a lot of uh, personal like psychological mess, because they're looking at hours and hours of like gore and crime and pornography and whatnot to filter those out from violence, etc., to filter those out from reaching kind of the consumers of this garden, which is us, right? So I think that story of AI just being this kind of entity that exists on its own autonomously is a very like falsified narrative, and there's a lot of like human labor. The human cost of maintaining that is very huge. So this kind of work speaks of gardens and gardeners in a certain way. So yeah, I'll stop at that. And I don't know if you're taking questions now or later, but yeah, that's it from me for now.
Yeah. Thanks, Harshit. So we'll take questions a little bit later once all the artists have presented their works and we have some discussions amongst you guys. So thank you so much. That was fantastic to look at your artworks within the show and also outside to give us a flavor of your artworks and your practice. Thank you.
Yeah.
So now I will move on to the next artist on our panel, Sahil. I'm going to introduce Sahil and ask him to come online to uh, speak and present his work. Sahil Betigeri is a 21-year-old visual artist, animator, and illustrator from Goa. Explores thought, nature, and consciousness in his work. A graduate from NID, National Institute of Design, Andhra Pradesh, he deciphers the sensorial networks humans share with nature. Raised by the ocean and forest, he sees nature as his closest connection to divinity. Diagnosed with aphantasia, he cannot visualize images mentally, but instead relies on tangible creation to process his thoughts. His practice is intuitive, shaped by subconscious prompts and his grandmother's Southeast Asian philosophical influences. Writing, writing also plays a key role, helping him map his emotions and creative process. Sahil's work spans semi conscious paintings, experimental new media, and animation, including his film Open Your Eyes, which is a part of this show. His current project, Vijnana, explores identity and collective superconsciousness. Blending into his surroundings like a chameleon, Sahil exists to create, conjuring imagery that may never be seen again. I welcome you, Sahil. It's great to have you on the panel. I please ask me to change the slides, and I will happy to do so. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Hi. So my practice is very is comes from this very organic intuition, and it's very subliminal. And in the sense, I let my hand sort of guide my mind, which is ushered by my subconscious thoughts and sensorial experiences and memories that I've accumulated. And it's very reactive to the things going on around me. So my animation is like this one limitless tool I really that I feel like my drawings really need. It adds a whole new dimension to my work, and it's gives me the space to sort of play and experiment with telling stories that I really want to connect with larger systems that I think we're all a part of. So you can go to the next slide. So the film is not on these slides, but it's called Open Your Eyes. It's a 2.5 minute stream of consciousness straight ahead animation that's a sort of visual elucidatory on the Vijnana layers of consciousness in Buddhist philosophy of the Yogacara tradition. So they divide consciousness into 7 layers: Chakshur, Shodha, Grana, Jiva, which is your sensory consciousness pertaining to your senses of sight, sound, taste, and smell. And then there is body consciousness. I think this is the most pertinent to the show, the context of the show. And it sort of explores how conscious states manifest physically, and sort of acknowledging your body as a tool and a vessel with which we sort of interact with this interconnected web of consciousness, and also being aware of a biological sentience that we as human beings is part with our place in the natural world, sort of share collectively. Then there's also mental consciousness, which is it's about how the most direct impulse of consciousness is happens in your mental space. And then there's collective, which is alaya vijnana, which is this sort of supra consciousness that everything sort of unifies into. And with this film, I'm sort of trying to nudge you, to implore you to sort of open your eyes, and then open your eyes beneath them, to sort of dissolve your identity of the self and unify it with the world, mind and matter alike. Uh, and I also wanted to sort of challenge this whole mind and body separation, this consciousness and matter duality that in a lot of Southeast Asian philosophies is considered a false problem, a false conflict, because without because mind and matter don't really have intrinsic independent existence; they're very interdependent. Uh, so, sort of unify mind and matter is the main aim of this film. Move to the next slide. This is another very new medium for me. So these are sculptures that are sculpted in virtual reality using a Quest 2 VR headset, and I sort of wanted to experiment with a very intuitive meandering that I think all humans have with this sort of with organic forms, and this very grounding desire to sort of imitate nature and with all its complexities and uh, but also within all these complexities how it holds such humility and the simple truth of life. And so I try to create these bilateral symmetric shapes in a VR space, uh, very semi-consciously again. And I think each of these sculptures in itself seems so like they are self-aware beings and creatures, very much inspired by anatomy and sort of meditating on proprioception, this ability of the human body to sort of be aware of its position and movement without any visual cues, which is how these sculptures were made in the first place. Uh, yeah, next slide. So this is some of my more personal sensorial painting practice, where uh, I also all my work is very much inspired by nature and this sort of idea of unifying with nature. But I also draw from a lot of my very personal experiences growing up in my childhood in my house in Goa. And I think my grandmother, like Sushant said, was is a very important influence in my life. She lives and breathes in all my work. And I take and these two paintings are like these come from these moments of existential crisis I had in relation to my grandmother. This emotional turmoil that these paintings really helped me sit with and resolve. So the first one is called Cloudy from a Dream I Never Had, and it's me dressed as a cloud for a children's fancy dress competition. And my grandmother stitched me this, costume. And this image, I think, is this biosphere that I had in my head, where I see myself as this child and like the safety, warmth, and airiness of this costume she stitched for me. And and when I lost her 4 years ago is when I made this painting, and this biosphere had like a whole water cycle going on with my thoughts evaporating, condensing, sublimating. There was rain in the form of tears, uh, and the and so this is part of a residency I did called Object Rove, and it sort of helped me sort of pinpoint the cactus as this symbol for my demon of grief, because my grandmother was a very superstitious woman, and she like freak out if we brought a cactus or a pokey plant in the house because it's like a bad omen. So that sort of became the symbol for my demon of grief or losing her. And at this point in time, it was taking over my mind. Um, and the other painting is called Birthing a Naka Banshee from a Red Oyster. So, as a kid, my grandmother gave me a black pearl and told me that I'm a curry moti in Kannada, which means a black pearl, and it's my the pearl is my birthstone. But and I never really questioned it because I live in my grandmother's universe. And until last year, when I ate an oyster for the first time, turns out I'm severely allergic, and I felt so rejected by the pearl birthers. And that's the first time I decided to look it up. And turns out it's not my birthstone, the pearl. I'm actually an emerald. But now more than ever, the pearl sort of has attached itself to my identity because of my grandmother. And it's just this whole crisis that I bring out subliminally in this painting. Move to the next slide. So this is some experimental video work and animation work. So the first one is the one on the left is called Dream Goggles, which sort of is me having a conversation with my concept of dream. So I've never really had a dream that I remember. I think because of my condition and being an artist, I think it's especially with a very surrealist practice, it's so important to be able to dream and take from that experience. So this is me just having conversation with dream and trying to reconcile and ask him why him or her why they're not like staying with me and letting me see my dreams. And on the left, it's so my grandmother used to call me Kari Moti, which is black pearl. And she used to also say that I'm a black pearl because I engulf light and it's a metaphor for me taking all the goodness in the world. And she used to call me a light eater. So, inspired by that metaphor and, extending myself to nature, the idea of being able to photosynthesize in that very metaphorical sphere, I made this very, again, semi conscious animation and video of me called Light Eater. Is that just like a gist of my practice so far?
Thank you so much, Sahil, for that personal journey through some of your artworks. And the first few were, of course, a part of your show. And I encourage everyone to, delve into these hypnotic artworks and animations that he's created, and also check out more of his artworks on social media. I think Sahil from Nature is his Instagram handle, where you can look into more of his trippy artwork. We'll come back to you a little bit after when we are at the panel discussion. So I will now move on to, alphabetically the last artist on the panel. We have Waswo X Waswo here with us, and I will give a short introduction, a very short introduction, and ask him to present his work right after I introduce him. Waswo X Waswo, born in 1953, studied at Milwaukee Center for Photography and Studio Marangoni, if I got that right, the Center for Contemporary Photography in Florence, Italy. His books, India Poems, The Photographs, published by Gallery Publishers in 2016, Men of Rajasthan, Photowala, and Gauri Dancers, these are few of his books. His latest book, Karkhana, a studio in Rajasthan, explores his working relationship with a variety of collaborating artists in the city of Udaipur, Rajasthan. He has been an active participant in the Indian art scene for over 20 years. He lives and works in Udaipur, Rajasthan, and is represented by Gallery Latitude 28 and Gallery East Space, both in New Delhi. and Gallery Isa in Mumbai. With that, I welcome Waswo to please share some of your works with us. Thank you.
Okay. You can go to slide 1.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I have to say I really don't know what I'm doing here. Shawshank was so nice to invite me to be part of this exhibition, but I feel like I'm a bit of a Luddite in this digital world. Yes, I use digital photography these days, but I was trained in the old chemical process photography. So I'm very based in craft, which doesn't always fit maybe with the digital processes. But I think there's some interesting things you can think about in terms of digital process and reality. So that's what I want to explore a little bit. We use these terms very arbitrarily and we don't always think about them. I am sort of a multimedia artist in that I work in many different types of media and sometimes they join, but I have a whole series of miniature paintings that I've done in collaboration with miniature painters here in Udaipur. This one that you're seeing on the screen was done by RVJ, who worked with me for many, many years. And what it depicts is actually my photography studio out in the village of Varda, which is about a half hour outside of Udaipur. And this is one of our typical roof parties where we sit on the roof after a photo shoot many times with the models and with the farmers who own this house that I rent. And we'll, have a mutton whiskey party, very Rajasthani. So anyway, my art is narrative. It's self-referential in so many ways. So this is one aspect of what I do. And now if we go to the next slide, image 2. Okay, this is not one of my miniatures, but it was created by one of my artists that I work with, Chirag Kumawat. And this is Chirag's own style. I've had no influence on this. He did this on his own. It's done in what he calls his folk art style. But it captures very perfectly the photo studio that I work at. Now, this used to be a bindi field, and the man standing behind me in the painting, that's Manohar Singh, my landlord, who rented me the bindi field to construct this makeshift, I call it my cowshed for making photographs. But you can see this is how it looks when we make a photograph. And if you look on the extreme left, you see hanging a backdrop that's been hand painted. You see Jay Prakash holding a tree limb into the what's going to be the photograph to give the feeling there are leaves coming down from the top. And you see the model, who happens to be a Gauri dancer. And the images I'm showing you today are all from the series Gauri Dancers. But what I want to talk about is how these layers form, okay, in shooting with the digital photograph. So let's go to the next one, number 3. Now, this is kind of a spoof photo, and I like to do self-portraits as the evil Orientalist. When I first started showing in India, I was often accused of being sort of a neo-Orientalist, and I took that to heart, and I started making sort of mocking photographs of myself as the Orientalist. So the main model in this is Ram Singh. No, I've got that wrong. Summer Singh. Summer Singh is standing there in his turban. He's one of the villagers from this family unit that I rent the studio from. They love to model. Everybody in the village loves to model. I call them models and I pay them as models. But he's standing there and I'm measuring him with a tape measure. Jay Prakash is down at his feet holding it. I'm up at the top with my magnifying glass so I can see the numbers. So I'm reenacting sort of this whole Orientalist trope of measuring and taking studies and, jotting things down in notebooks. And the man in the back, that's Ganpat Mali, he's moving a plant. So there's 2 things going on here. I mean, in one way, I'm depicting myself as the Orientalist, but I'm also showing the studio as it functions, So I'm bringing in this element of this is how we work. And Ganpat's moving the potted plant because many times when I take the photographs, I say, move this plant here, move this plant there. Oh, these plants are boring. Let's use something else instead. So now I want to get into the layers. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. Oh, you put them together. I didn't know you were going to do that. Okay. If you look on the left, there is Radha and Krishna. I don't know if you can see this very well because it's rather small. So these are from the series Gauri Dancers. And this became, I call it an accidental book, because I never set off to document Gauri dancers, because I actually don't think like an ethnographer or an Orientalist. I think like a pictorialist photographer who is just making interesting photographs. But over the years, I realized that I had photographed so many Gauri dancers in Udaipur that it made the material for a book. And if you don't know, Gauri it's a tribal tradition of the Bhil and the Meena tribe largely, and it's only located in Mewar. You don't find it any place. You won't find it in Jaipur. If you go a little south of the Gujarat border, you can find it there. If you go a little into Madhya Pradesh, you can find it there. But it's considered a very Mewari tradition. And what they do is it's semi-religious, it's some semi-play, it's semi-comical, but they reenact stories from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and they intersperse this with folk tales, local Rajasthani Mewari folk tales. They intersperse it with politics. They will suddenly go off and start talking about Modi and Kerjewal and Rahul or something like that, Lalu Prasad. So it becomes sort of a hodgepodge of things, and they kind of invent it as they go. It always starts at 11 o'clock in the morning after they do their puja, and then it goes on till sunset, and it ends with the firing of a rifle. Okay. So these photographs, I was basically not photographing the dance, which is very minimal. It's pretty much just walking in a circle with a little hopping motion. And then once in a while, certain characters will go off and perform something individually. But I was very much interested in the costuming, because what is going on here, if you think about it, these layers, as I'm saying, I'm shooting with a digital camera, okay? And what I'm focusing on is a hand-painted backdrop, some more detailed than others. The one on the right you'll see is sort of a very fuzzy backdrop, very soft, very fuzzy. The one on the left, you see painted plants, different things are coming into that backdrop. So that's one layer of reality, the paint on the canvas, which transforms the canvas into an image. Then you have the layer of the plants, the chara on the ground, which creates the ambiance of the photograph. Then you have the layer of the model, in this case, the Gauri dancers. And they also have layers, because Gauri dancers are only male. They don't allow women to participate. Women are only observers. So it's almost like old Shakespearean theater that way. And that the old Shakespearean theater was only done by men, if you know. So you have all of these farm boys, they are not professionals. They come from farms. They only do this once in a year, yet they really get into cross-dressing, presenting themselves as the opposite gender, presenting themselves in different roles as maybe a dacoit or some sort of, robber or whatever. There's so much role playing that goes on. So you look at them, you've got this farm boy that's layered with makeup, layered with a dress on top or with robes, whatever. And so there's another layer there, it's not Radha, it's a farm boy being Radha for Gauri, which lasts for 40 days. They go from village to village to do this. It's not done for the tourists. It's very much a village ritual. So you have all of these layers in here, and then I'm shooting this with digital in color. Then it's converted to black and white in Photoshop. Then I'm making a print, a black and white print on archival paper. And then it's being hand colored by, it used to be Roger Sony, now it's Dalpat Jingar, is hand coloring these photographs with watercolors, Winsor Newton we use generally, and other pigments. And in some cases, like the one on the right, The photograph Dalpat is actually, if you can see it, if I don't know if you can enlarge that at all, but the photograph has all actually had little plants and things added to it in the miniature style in the background. So Dalpat's actually painting in the foliage in places. So it becomes a multi-layered kind of presentation. And when you look at this, I hope that it evokes a feeling of fantasy and wonder and sort of a magical feel that transports you into this world of Gauri, which is a mythological world. I'm trying to express this mythological world that the characters inhabit. But it's interesting how, this whole thing that the digital photograph is just one layer in successive layers of image making. We can go to the next one, I think. So here we have two more photographs from the same series. The man on the left is playing with a darush. And, once again, you go into these layers because, okay, so he's a Beel. The Gauri dancers tend to be Beel or Meena. Maybe I forgot to say that. But he honestly did not know how to hold a darush. So I had to run in there and tell him, no, you have to pull it back really hard and get some tension on that bow, because he was just sort of holding it there because he's playing a role and it's not a role he's used to. He normally doesn't shoot with a bow and arrow. So I had to coach him a little bit into how to hold the darush. Once again, that's a layer because it's somebody, he's not just a farm boy, but he's acting in some way. And then if you go on the right, you have these two very interesting men who I believe I was told that the man on the right is supposed to represent a Muslim woman. So it's some sort of Muslim couple. And this was not taken in Udaipur. So I'm a little confused about this one because this was taken in another village outside of Udaipur. So I didn't get to know them as well. This was done very quickly. So there are these layers of who these people are. I think there's one more slide.
No, I've just clubbed these into the same slide. So this is the last one.
No, I think we're missing one. Okay, well, that's too bad.
Is it? Hold on.
Maybe I didn't send you one. Okay, you must not have it.
Okay, I'm sorry to have missed that one.
So that's pretty much what I have to say, but I'll leave it open to questions.
Thank you so much into the world of the Gauri for taking us through the world of the Gauri dancers.
I was so worried about going overtime. I think it ended up being short.
Yeah, I think we've managed. So now we can go into the panel discussion and maybe for the next 15 minutes or so, I invite all the three participating artists to come on board, and I invite my curatorial companion Anuj to kind of take over the conversation and ask them questions about their work, maybe put them against each other to discover what this curatorial theme is and unpack how these come under the Fungible Avatars thematic of the show. Thank you, all the artists for presenting. Now we are moving into the panel discussion. Welcome, Anuj.
Thank you, Shashank. And it was a pleasure to, listen to all the artists talk about their work, because I have been engaging with their works through my own position over the last few weeks. And, certainly what the artists have shared today gives a lot more context to what we are seeing. And as I was listening to them, and also thinking along with the curatorial, subset theme of fungible avatars, I would kind of like to share that this. I went back to the internet and looked up the meaning of fungible, and the meaning is as simple as something for exchange, something that can be exchanged. And avatar itself is like a doppelganging of certain identity, and so fungible avatar, in some sense, kind of pushes us to think about what do we exchange identities for. And each of the artists in this panel have actually found a very distinct entry point into the question of identity. For example, if we think of Harshit's work, you see in the work there is a very visceral kind of engagement with the physicality of the body, and so this trope of the mask comes in very strongly on one hand, and on the other hand, when he peeps almost into the interiors of the guts and slices the body into these multiple screens, you also think about this new kind of AI mapping of all our things on our watches and whatnot. You say these watches that monitor your heartbeat and your pulse rate and all these things, which actually are different aspects, physical aspects through which you actually start mapping your body. So that is one kind of entry point that we get into the disembodiment through the digital, through Harshit's work. And on the other hand, when we look at Sahil's work, there's a very high engagement with the free flow of the mind, and that's what the form of his work is, where he's very kind of intimately engaging with the mental process of the mind of the work, but still kind of asserting that the dualism in Southeast cultures is not acknowledged between the mind and body. And so that's a very interesting kind of entry point that we get into what comes out. And I was particularly intrigued by this whole thing of the virtual sculpture that you introduced, because it's a very innovative way of thinking about form altogether. And lastly, in the case of Waswo, ex-Waswo, I thought that he was bringing in this whole question of this setting in the works that he is particularly included in the show Disembodiment, and how the setting, for example, the use of the backdrop, the use of a place which kind of stands for something else in the final received image, changes the identity of the person who himself or herself is kind of posing as someone else. So with that kind of understanding, I would like to pose just one question each to our artists. And I will start with Harshit, who was talking about also the dance forms that he was showing, and also the video that he was showing, and how identity is constructed through the idea of mask. And in the digital space, Harshit, I was thinking that it allows, on one hand, the emancipate. It has an emancipatory kind of quality which allows you to normalize differences. Whereas on the other hand, there is also a tendency of universalization, or which is you may call the standardization of beauty, through digital processes. So I just want to kind of understand that. How do you kind of what position do you take vis-a-vis these tensions that the digital space allows you to open up vis-a-vis questions of identity, if you would like to respond, and this whole idea of the mask, that is the mask more of a universalizing thing or more of a liberating thing? Whether it is homogenizing or does it allow us to be different, is something that I would like to understand. That how do you see that while creating your artwork?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that particular work, I think, which you're referring to, the one around beauty and the kind of, in some ways, like the confirmation to the standards of beauty that digital kind of realms start to enforce. That was a very direct response almost to a TikTok like video that I'd seen. So of course, like we don't get to use TikTok directly, but they had come up with this like face filter, which like for even for me, like who's been probably practicing in this space for some years now, I like whenever there are filters, etc., you can kind of disassociate that with like, reality in a certain sense. Like you can get a sense of okay, that's just a digital layer, and it's not the real like person visually or something like that. But with this thing, like the technology aspect of it had gotten so real where instantly like you were just like seeing this different but still very much like visually identifiable you, but in a very different like way. And that was messing around with people's heads so much that like I could have been this or I should have been this or whatever, right? It was not just it wasn't a fascinate like a sense of fascination where you could be like this like a very different kind of identity that you choose to embody for a certain amount of time. It was very much you with these like almost like very darkly pointing out sort of the flaws as they've started to be called. And it just yeah, like it was making people like react in very strong ways of how bad they started feeling about themselves because of that. And
Yeah.
I think that was the kind of, I think when we talk of disembodiments, like how maybe the idea of like entering alternate identities through masks has always been there, but that is a very conscious like uh, decision and a very like spiritual almost, if I can call it that. But this becomes a very like digitally enforced kind of disembodiment and entering into a different identity. So yeah, I think that is kind of what the word speaks to.
Yeah, yeah. Vasu, did you want to add in something?
Yeah, I just forgot to say that with the Gauri dancers, the makeup, which is a form of mask,
Yeah.
it works very much the same way. And what always
Yeah.
amazes me about it is you have these they work on the farm. And if there's not much work on the farm, they'll go into the city and work on construction sites. But during Gauri, the shy boy suddenly becomes a hero in the Gauri saga, or the macho boy suddenly becomes a woman. And it's amazing to see because many of them really get into those roles. It allows them to express sides of themselves they normally don't express. And it's quite amazing to see that, it seems like they find it very liberating to do.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, and absolutely. And I was just going to say that this idea of the mask was, almost like recurring in both your work and Harshit's work. It is very interesting that how the mask is, simultaneously a tool of invisibilization and empowerment of identity in this space. And the other is, of course, Harshit, it's very interesting that you when you turn the gaze inwards into the body and show us all those things that are happening inside the body, giving an image to the eye watches that we wear to track all our functionings inside the body, and then really what is happening, what are our sleep patterns, and what are our heartbeats and pulse rates and all those things. So it was a kind of a very interesting peeping into the actual mechanism of the body by disembodying it. So that was very interesting. I was very intrigued about knowing more about the sculptures in virtual reality from Sahil. So if Sahil, and if you don't mind, if you all can switch on your cameras, it'll be really helpful. Um, if you Sahil, if you could talk about your experience of sculpting in virtual reality. You're on mute, I think.
So someone I know just happened to have buy this VR headset called the Quest 2, and there's a software called Adobe Medium that lets you sculpt in a VR space. And it first just started off with me just messing around with it until
Yeah.
I discovered, an exercise by which I can very semi-consciously, let my movements and the process of sculpting itself guide the concept
Mm,
of this sculpture. And I found that it had like this repetitive pattern of drawing from various, especially with bilateral symmetry. It had a very repetitive pattern, drawing from
yeah.
very organic forms inspired by anatomy. And I felt like this came very instinctually to me, and I think it does. It in our movements, it comes very instinctually to all human beings because
Yeah.
of I think as being a part of the natural world, we have like this very grounding desire to imitate nature
Yeah.
uh, in all our processes. So
Yeah,
that
I think it was a unique kind of disembodiment because culture is such a kind of engaged process with material form, and that is a very interesting kind of disembodiment where you are almost channeling your mental kind of energy into that sculpture, which is happening actually only in the digital space.
yeah.
And I found that was very unique. So I really am fascinated to now explore more. And I would want you to respond on how the curator has spaced it in the New Art City space, like because when you interact with it along with your film, it becomes like right now these are suspended completely freely into the exhibition space. Did you always imagine them to be perceived like this? Because I mean, I mean, sculptures. There's a very distinct way in which one experiences sculptures in real space. And what does the suspension of that real space do if it is virtual? Uh,
I think the whole juxtaposition of both these artworks, in a sense, because I try to sort of disembody the physical
mm,
form using surreal shapes and spaces and these anthropomorphic transformations with my very fragmented semi-conscious processes.
mm,
But seeing them together, I think, gives a sense of complete distortion of the
mm,
physical form, which I think is very interesting, and especially how they are placed in such a
mm.
visceral way,
Yeah.
which would be a very different experience in an actual physical space with physical limitations. So I think this is very
Yeah. I
good.
also feel that in the current, strained uh, political times that we are witnessing all these wars and stuff, these almost disembodiments mean also that landscape of distraughtement that
Yeah.
we actually kind of receive through images from our computer screens. So, it kind of creates a completely different landscape and starts talking to those landscapes of, disheveled places and bodies, which are kind of completely debris today. So I think it was very interesting for me to think that. And thank you, Sahil. And lastly, Vasco, I was thinking about this idea of transports and the idea of place and identity in your work, because you also kind of have been in a place which was once not unfamiliar to you. Uh, and how do you, and this I think in some sense is translating in your work in a very conceptual way, where this notion of place and identity is in some sense there in the way you work out your whole artwork. Would you like to kind of share something about it? One of your works also spoke about you as the Orientalist in the frame. So that's also a way of emancipating another world, uh, embracing a new world which one is kind of entering in.
Well, if anybody knows my history, I came to India oh God, way long back. 1993 was the first time. And I started traveling around the country with a Rolleiflex camera taking photographs, and that was all chemical process. I'd go back to the US to develop them in my darkroom. And one thing led to another. And by 1999, 2000, I was spending 6 months of the year here and then longer. But I had my first real exhibitions in, not sure, maybe 2005, something like that, down in Kochi. And and that exhibition traveled, and it was the sepia tone photographs, the chemical process ones. And I got a lot of accusations of being Orientalist, and it really boggled my mind, because to me they were very pictorialist, and I thought each photograph was beautiful in its own way. And each photograph, I did a lot of portraits. Each photograph was a beautiful portrait, but still first, that was the sort of the peak era when everybody liked to point fingers and say Orientalism. And in some ways I accepted, in some ways I rebelled against it. And I think by going to Udaipur, I always loved Udaipur so much, and my team is wonderful here, but by coming here and shifting the way I work to digital, and then shifting it to taking it off the street, no longer doing street portraits, but doing it in a studio setting with a painted backdrop, with props, it sort of announces its falsity. It doesn't say this is real. It says this is a fantasy of some sort. There might be some reality within it, but it's not like a documentary photograph. And that was my escape route in my mind. Now, some people still have problems with that, but by and large, the new series got much more accepted. But I like to be, it's been kind of fun to play with the whole evil Orientalist motif, and I've done a couple series on that. We even made a comic book called The Evil Orientalist. I don't know if you know that. For my first show at Gallery Espace, we had a comic book called The Evil Orientalist that we gave out at the opening. So it's something I like to play with. People can take it whichever way they like.
In fact, and this whole idea of escape, I think, also plays out in the subjects you choose to photograph, because in masking themselves or redressing themselves, they're also trying to escape an identity and go into another place, and that same place is the space of mythology, like you said, and you kind of recreate that place for them in the space of the photograph. So I thought that was also a unique kind of disembodiment. And
I like to find spaces that are not cliched and you can't have a knee-jerk response to. And that's one reason I like the Gowrie dancers, because in this day and age, it's very easy to want to plug that into gender theory, and it's LGBT plus type of work. But actually, like I keep saying, these are farm boys. I mean, there's no connection between them and any kind of queer theory or anything. They're farm boys, and they do this. They've been doing this for a couple hundred years. So it's a whole different thing. You can't easily label it. And I like those liminal spaces that are not easily labeled.
And
I feel that I'm not easily labeled. So
and it's so interesting that I think the space of the ideal for the artist as well as the subject and everyone actually comes or colludes in the artwork finally. Like everyone is able to find that middle ground in the space of the photograph that you eventually construct, which is actually very interesting. So I think these are very unique, insights into the whole project. And thank you so much for sharing the work. I think Shashank, maybe we can take some questions from the audiences, unless any of the artists have anything to add to this discussion.
Yeah, I think we can just ask if any of the participating artists have anything else to add. Else, I'll just give you a minute. Else, we can open it up for any questions we might have before we wrap up the session.
people are always shy.
Yeah, that's true. I like how Waswo began saying, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I think that was also a conscious decision to include your work because, like you, there are also other photographers in the show like Vivek Vilasni and Pushpamala N, who also work with the digital medium. But the idea of bringing you all together, and even sometimes if you look in the virtual art space, Vivek's work is talking to Waswo's works, and they're both talking about the idea of the setting, the idea of recreating a certain myth. So these kind of ideas of the body in the Indian thought really brings these artworks together and also helps converse with each other's works when they are juxtaposed or placed next to each other. And of course, Harshit's work I've been following for a very long time, and I wish we had more time to kind of look into his some of his latest works, which I probably hope to curate someday in the near future. But the way he innovates and uses the potential of not augmented reality, sorry, artificial intelligence and latest new media technologies is fascinating because of his lens that he comes with. He is looking at India, he's looking at his own roots, he's looking at our larger collective identity. And it is a little bit more of a deeper dive, a serious dive into consciousness when it comes to Sahil's work, which was so intriguing. And when looking for artists, it was so refreshing to come across Sahil's works because of his the plethora of mediums he deals with, like from the 3D sculptures to his fantastic animation. I mean, I watched his videos on loop. I think everyone should go online and look at some of his very hypnotic videos, and also his paintings. He does paintings. He has a cool website. He works with both analog and digital, similar to many other artists on the show. And I think it's the conversation between the artworks, between the content of the works, the context of the works, the concepts of the work, is where this show is like kind of exploring this idea of the body in the Indian thought, whatever it be the Orientalists, the evil Orientalist view, or someone who really want to deep dive to their own identity. Where is the body, kind of being represented or reinvented in the digital space? And I hope the show will give you a better idea when you explore it on your own. Uh, if my ranting wasn't enough for breaking the ice for further questions, I think any other comments are welcome from the artists. I mean, if you want to, if you've seen each other's works on the show and want to comment on the platform or anything like that, you're welcome to do this.
I'm just a little curious. I have a question for Harshit and his process of prompting in AI. I'm very naive when it comes to AI, but I'm curious about how the prompting works. Do you prompt the visual or do you prompt the concept and let it, intellectualize the visual with its intelligence?
Yeah, so I actually don't use a lot of like prompt-based AI models. I'm slightly like old school in that sense, even within like the AI kind of timeline of things. So I train my own models like using visual data, which is like a collection of images, drawings, or whatever it is, like visual material, and like I train kind of small models from that, and then like create new images from that model. So it's not like a pre-trained model which exists on the internet, like stable diffusion, a mid journey or something. So I'm not like directly working with those models. Of course, I use them sometimes just to kind of visualize certain things, like do some like fun exercise. But the kind of works that we saw, all of them were done by sort of custom trained models on certain themes that I wanted to work with. Yeah.
Thank you.
That gives a lot more control also in terms of like the kind of visual outputs you want. And there's a certain like, I think Waswo brought up the word craft. There's a certain craft that comes into play in training the models in your own way also, where you can really play around with like parameters like learning rate of the model, etc., etc. Like there's a whole sort of analogous to like decisions you would make in, let's say, while painting or like while making pottery or whatever, right? Like, so there's a lot of the parameters that come into play when you're training your own model, and it lets you have more control, direct control over the output.
Definitely. Makes sense. Thank you.
Great. I like how you brought up both the analogous in the digital through that idea of craft. I think that kind of is a good segue to probably um, ask if anybody has final thoughts, comments, or questions. Yes, Waswo, yes.
I could just say one thing because I know you want to close it, but Harshit was talking about training the models in AI. But I mean, when you're in the studio, you basically need to train the models too. And I've read a lot of articles where photographers claim they like to do a collaboration with the model and let the model make a lot of decisions about what they're going to do. But that's a problem because when you're dealing with the village kids, especially, well, everybody really, you know, what they want to do often is like stand straight and smile at the camera. And can I have my children with me or something like that? And it doesn't work. But then every once in a while you hit a model who really knows what to do. Like, you know, the expression is in photography, they give good face, you know. It's like they're just naturals and they just start posing for you, you know, all sorts of really great poses, and you don't have to tell them to do a thing. So it's kind of part of the fun of doing it. So,
I think we have one audience question by Bharti.
Kapadia.
Yes, you can unmute yourself and please ask your question.
I'm sorry, but that was a mistake. So, excuse me.
Okay. Not an issue.
Hi.
Yes.
I'm already following one of the artists. I want to follow Harshit and Vas. So please get the link for them.
Sure. I will drop a text with if the artist could themselves drop a message of your Instagram handles maybe on the chat. Maybe
I'm just Waswo X Waswo on both Instagram and Facebook, so it's simple to find.
Thank you.
And Harshit is Harshit RNNH.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just sent it on the chat.
Thank you.
Perfect. I think we are at 6:30 and that's a good time to wrap up today's panel discussion. I thanks everyone for attending today's panel discussion, especially the artists, Harshit, Sahil, and Waswo. Thank you so much. It's been great interacting with you and personally hearing about your artworks from you. I thank Anuj, my curatorial companion, for moderating the panel. And I also thank Vishwajit, if he can briefly come on his camera maybe. He has been a great help in visualizing this exhibition as well. And of course, it wouldn't have been possible without the New Art City platform itself. And I encourage you to all click the links in the chat box pinned there to explore more things about the show. This recording will be put up on YouTube and shared on the project page for a later viewing. Thank you so much for making time on a Sunday evening. We will keep you updated via email, and have a great evening. Thank you so much.
All the
Thank
best,
you.
Shashank. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Good
Thank
evening.
you. Bye.